Okay, so just to introduce ourselves and maybe to add a qualifier here, when Danny and I first began to talk about how would we discuss how GitHub is used during our Book Dash event, which happens biannually and is a kind of key contribution hackathon or contribute-a-thon kind of event for the Turing Way community, we realized that we couldn't talk about the Book Dash without talking about practices that are really embedded throughout our entire community. So while we'd be kind of looping back specifically to Book Dash towards the end, we also have tons of practices that are kind of embodied through really every aspect of what we do. So just a little bit about us. My name is Steele. I'm the community manager of the Turing Way, based at the Alan Turing Institute, as well as an ethnographer of open source. And I'll pass it to Danny.
Hi, I'm a volunteer contributor to the Turing Way. I'm the infrastructure co-lead, been involved in the project for a few years, and to put food on the table, I'm a computational neuroscientist.
And we really want to flag here that while the project, the Turing Way, is based at the Alan Turing Institute, as Danny indicated, it's really, it's hosted by, but not exclusive to. It really wouldn't be what it is without the massive number of contributors and collaborators from really institutions all around the world, of which two of us are speaking to you today, but we're representing a much larger contribution, a community of folks. So a little bit more about the Turing Way itself. Most visibly, you might have seen our open access guides for data science and open research. We've added a link here to a start page that can kind of link you out to various elements of the book. And we'll be sharing more so screenshots here in a second. And then when I pass the mic to Danny, he'll be kind of taking us more interactively through our repository on GitHub. But this is kind of the most visible aspect of the project that you might have seen, you might have visited to gather resources for your own work. And take a look on the top right-hand corner of your screen. You'll see kind of three buttons here, and I'll talk about that in a second. So the Turing Way is this kind of open collaboration, the most visible of which, the top of this iceberg is the set of Turing Way guides, which you may or may not have interacted with before. But, there's more to collaboration than you might think, because there's a whole suite of processes that kind of enable that infrastructure that allows collaboration to happen. And similarly, there's a whole infrastructure beneath and around the Turing Way, beneath the kind of iceberg of those guides, all of which are hosted on the GitHub platform. And that way to dive in for many people is through those series of buttons on the upper right-hand corner of every page of every guide, meaning it's an opportunity to suggest an edit or a typo that you might be seeing on a page, to open an issue related to a part of your work. And so, that beneath the iceberg, beneath the kind of most visible aspect of those guides is really the entire GitHub repository of the Turing Way. And again, Danny will walk you through kind of what the repo looks like, but it's quite huge. It contains, we have this one folder that contains all of the guides themselves. All of them live in the book folder, but in that repo, we also have many different elements related to the project, related to governance, conference talks that we've given, how to contribute, elements of workshops that we've given before, different translated versions of the project. And this all kind of sits underneath the kind of visible surface of the Turing Way. And very excitingly, we recently actually moved to a GitHub organization, which means that perhaps some of this might be splitting off into its own sets of repositories, but we won't talk about that here. So perhaps most visibly and most obviously, we use the Turing Way, we use GitHub for the Turing Way in order to collaboratively write our guides together. And GitHub is really good for that, as our previous co-presenters have really shared, right? It enables kind of project hosting, version control. For us, it's also maybe a secret mode of upskilling folks into contributing more broadly into open source, the open source ecosystem, as a documentation-centered project and not necessarily a code-based open source project. It becomes a mechanism for folks to use, for example, Markdown for the first time, to make perhaps their first issue in a GitHub repository, to kind of get used to using these tools that, as Yanni was saying, can really, be a very valuable skill for any data science and training, but also really anyone looking to upgrade their skill set. However, what we found within the Turing Way community is that there is this kind of perpetual tension between that process of upskilling and the challenge that comes with that, but also how can you make sure that the barrier for entry is as low as possible in order to enable people to contribute to the project? How can you make sure that that contribution process is really accessible? And these are all kind of inherent to really the open source ecosystem more broadly that use a platform like GitHub. But perhaps less visibly, and again, kind of peeling back the layers here beneath the iceberg is, yes, on one hand, it's a place for collaboration and co-creation, but it's also very much a place where we express care. And care can be embedded in these platforms in a way that kind of encourages that collaboration that's really core to events like Book Dash, but also just really core to how the guides themselves are co-created with writers and other community members, as well as all sorts of projects that folks are working on within the community. And very importantly and increasingly, it's also very much a means for us to be accountable and transparent, not only to the community, but to anyone who is able to access our resources and learn more about us as a community. And we increasingly want to use GitHub more so as a platform for that, getting a lot of ideas from our co-presenters. Just an example of what a series of different issues. We also utilize issue templates and use it for many different aspects of the project, as I've mentioned before, everything from archiving our newsletters, keeping track of talks, to project management, event tracking, as alongside, the creation of chapters, the suggestion of edits to different ones. All of that is kind of within our GitHub repository, and the sorting of different tags is really important for that exact reason. Just a couple of examples here of what some of our issue templates look like. We have fireside chat checklists, as well as Turing Way talk checklists. And these are much more task oriented. And in fact, we're definitely getting ideas here on how can the suggestion of a fireside chat, for example, be using the same methods in order to make that process of co-creating an event happen on GitHub itself. Just an example of what some of those checklists might look like. Don't worry too much about the text, but again, it's much more operationally focused, very much focused on this kind of like, how can we report openly about what tasks we're working on, and how can we keep track of what we're also working on within the community. As a project that has now over 400 contributors over the course of the past more than 4 years. As I mentioned before, and I'll add a note here because it's really very much a work in progress, is that we're aiming to use GitHub much more so as a means of being transparent and reporting out kind of what we're working on across the community. And we'll kind of talk about this in a moment, but we've realized that GitHub as this platform that is open and is available for people to be able to contribute to the project is kind of underneath the surface of the iceberg. How can we make sure that that's also a method for folks who are looking at the guides, looking at us as a community? How can they get involved in the kind of underlying mechanisms, the infrastructure that enables us to work as a project, and transparency reporting is a part of that, and not just being open, but being accessible. But with that, I'm going to pass it on to Danny to talk about the good stuff and how we use GitHub for community care.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to focus on a couple of little tools that we use within GitHub. Bots. So there's, I think, 3 or 4 bots that I'll mention in the next few minutes. And the first one that I'll start with is the All Contributors bot. This is a way of recognizing all of the people that contribute to our project, including, there isn't our project is like 90% text with some kind of code that makes things happen. And so actually most of our contributions are non-coding related. But when I say non-coding, I mean, as well as writing text for the book, I mean, reviewing other people's work, I mean, adding alt text to images, a whole range of other kind of non-content type contributions. And I think this is really important. I'm going to do what they always tell you not to do and do a live demo of it. And So we found an issue that is work in progress currently, and this person is suggesting some new content, and we are at the stage where, okay, there's been lots of conversation about it, but we're at the stage now where we could add them as a contributor. And it is important to mention here that a bot doesn't make the decisions for us. It is just a tool that we use. And so behind the use of the bot, there is somebody like us that goes, huh, yeah, this person needs to be mentioned. And we have a fairly low barrier for adding people as contributors because it doesn't cost us anything. It kind of it's a lovely thing to be able to do, to pull people into it. And I'm just going into, oh no, wrong one. Thank you. So I was just jumping into, there we go. So I've done this 100 times, but I know that the code, the little line that we need for it, is hidden in our contributing file. And so I'll grab that from here. And also I'll open the emoji key for the different types of contribution that this bot can handle. So which one is relevant here? I think I was thinking of doing ideas. So this person has contributed a very cool idea. So what I can do is please add Notsky or ideas. And then what this will do in the background is a whole bunch of legwork that it saves me. So I'm pretending I'm Anne today. I hope that's okay. And let's just refresh that. Okay, this is exciting. And this is why we don't do live demos. Okay, that doesn't seem to be doing what it should be doing. Okay, I'll continue with the presentation and we'll come back to this after the next few slides and see if all contributors bot has woken up. Yeah, not yet. Okay, I'll come back to that. Can we make it bigger again? Thanks. Cool. Alrighty, so that is one of the bots. I'll hopefully be able to show you in a few minutes what it does, and if not, I'll talk you through it. Okay. Some of the other automated actions that we have set up using bots include this welcome bot. And this acts whenever anybody does their first issue or their first pull request on the repo. And this is just kind of automated text that somebody as part of the community wrote probably years ago. It has been updated when necessary, but I love it because it sets the right tone. As soon as somebody makes a contribution to the project, they get this automated message that just kind of brims with positivity and thanks, and hopefully makes people feel included. And I realized as well today that in setting that tone, it means that whatever messages follow this, it sets the tone for that to be a really kind of positive conversation, hopefully brimming with positive emojis and praise. And I think that's really important. And the fact that it does that without us having to actively monitor the repository at every moment of every day is great. A couple of the other bots that we use. So we use a bot called In Solidarity, which checks for inclusive language. And this is, I should say, all of these are great because it takes a lot of the manual work out of it and flags things for us to actually focus our time and energy on. The accessibility alt text box flags images that don't have alt text in comments on issues and pull requests, which is very cool. That is something that makes GitHub more accessible for screen reader users, which is really nice. Okay. So we mentioned at the start of this presentation that we do use GitHub in planning for events, but actually at those events, we rely on a lot of other tools because GitHub is not a Swiss Army knife of infinite uses. It's really good for some things. It's good for hosting our repositories, for the code and the documentation. It's great for version control, reviewing other people's work, for public documentation, as Anne was talking about. GitHub's not very good for actually collaboratively writing in real time. For that, we use things like HackMD, Etherpad, or even Google Docs. So during our hackathons, when people are kind of collaborating in real time, we go to other tools, and I think that's important to say. Like, it is not everything. Okay, so these are some of the other tools that we use alongside GitHub for kind of prototyping and bringing together different ideas. We use different mind map tools for collaborative writing and even just writing in general, rather than producing the content on GitHub itself. People quite often choose to do that locally through things like VS Code or any other text editors. Well, I should have said, so all of the guides are Markdown based. And so it hopefully both it should be simple enough that people can kind of pick it up and run with it. And also, if they haven't used Markdown before, it's a great kind of little nudge to get people into using Markdown, because that is a tool that is used extensively in other open source projects. And then for communication, we use lots of different tools. We're currently, we'll be paying very close attention to the rest of this series in terms of trying out other open source tools. But at the moment, we use Elements, Slack, Zoom, various other things, and we're always on the lookout for ways to shift our tool use to align with our values. Okay. Shall I hand back over to you?
Sure. So we've kind of mentioned, thanks so much, Danny. We had mentioned that in talking about, the Book Dash event specifically, we in many ways were talking about the practices that are embedded really all across the community. And we thought that we just had two kind of, to give you an example of the kind of interplay of tools that we use for the Book Dash specifically, which is a kind of week-long event where folks are working on different projects related to the Turing Way, be that writing a new chapter, working on a set of translations, maintaining infrastructure, or drawing up a policy for accessibility practices. A lot of those are really, all of those are really kept track of in GitHub issues. We have quite a suite of colors that appears twice a year in May and in November. But as you can see from kind of the screenshot on the right, we have two events that happened over the course of the last day of the Book Dash every Friday, where folks kind of share out what they've been working on throughout the week. And in fact, the whole week is full of folks working in asynchronously together, in video calls, in person. And it's that combination of different tools, different ways of communicating with each other, while having this kind of publicly accountable platform, this place for folks to contribute notes, to write together, to upload their notes together. Really, we have found to be a very important combination. Again, maybe just re-emphasizing that GitHub is not a Swiss Army knife, but it is a place where we found so much value as a community to gather kind of everything together underneath our iceberg of a project. Just a shout out to the community of contributors and users, of which two of us are here.
Maybe just on that as well. So this is a screenshot created through the All Contributors bot. And in fact, should we jump back to the...
Oh, yes.
Let's see if it did work. I suspect...
Crossy fingers.
We have had a couple of... Aha! It's worked!
Yes!
Fantastic. Normally it's instantaneous, but with moving to our own organization, there's been a couple of bugs in the system. But so All Contributors bot here is telling me I've set up a pull request for this person. So if I go to this pull request, and so I can see, so if we have a look at the files that it's changed, what it's saying is that it's added a little section. Don't worry too much about the coding here. The great thing is that you don't actually need to understand it if you're using the bot. But just if you're interested, it's modified this little behind the scenes file that we have that lists all of our contributors. And then, so it's not showing us the difference here because it actually, in order to add a single contributor to the page, since it's organized in a grid, it needs to modify the whole page. That's an issue that I'm trying to work on upstream at the moment. Anyhow, it's modified these 3 files, and I can have a quick look at that. And I can go and quickly review those changes. That all looks good to me. So I'm reviewing the work of the bot, which might seem a slightly strange thing to do.
Can you show them the lines with the checks that we have? Oh, I guess it might not.
So we have lots of, what Anna's talking about, we have lots of automated checks that we refer to as continuous integration that run on this repository. Actually, this bot bypasses those just to make the integration a little quicker. And since it is such a kind of a specific thing that this bot is always doing, we've set it up so that these checks, I believe, don't run on these.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I can merge the pull request. Confirm that. Fantastic. And that has automatically closed it. And if I go back to where that was requested, fantastic. And now it will take, no, it should be ready in there. So I've added Nolsky. Okay, so if I go back to here, so this is all of our contributors. Let's see. Okay, we have one match for Nolsky.
Yeah.
So this bit might not work exactly as I intended because it uses the username for the, sorry, it uses the kind of given name for the user rather than their handle. So I'm looking for Mike. Oh, sorry, Mike, if you're putting you on the spot. There we go. So it's added Mike as an ideas person.
Woohoo!
Ooh, okay, I'm glad that worked. All right, back to you, Anne.
Great, thanks, Danny. So I know we're just coming up on time here, so this is just an invitation to join us at any community event or any of the working groups and teams that operate within the project. Thank you to the team, to the many folks that are not in this space. A couple of links if you'd like to check out our guides, different platforms, all that good stuff. And I think that's it from us. Thanks so much, everyone.